Welcome to the Liverpool FA podcast. Our aim is to provide regular insight from a variety of experts to help you in your own football journey. We'll do it through interviews, roundtable discussions, and by linking to other resources to help support you. For more information about each episode, just tap the album art, which will provide you with more about our guests and links to further content.
No intro quotes. Tonight we're stripping it back and going back to basics, and it's a bit of a different one. So this evening, my colleague and previous podcast guest, Keith Webb, recorded a webinar for FA education down here at St George's Park, and our esteemed colleague, Jake Kemp, about a minute before we started the webinar, said, why don't you record this and put it out on the Liverpool FA podcast? So thanks for the idea, Jake, and we did. And this is the audio. So just for context, the webinar was a FA licensed coaches level 1, 2, 3. It was an hour's CPD, and the content was based around interactions with players and more specifically how to challenge players. So Keith and I decided to riff on the subject for about an hour with some audience questions thrown in the mix. So let us know what you think of this one, and hope you enjoy this conversation with Keith Webb and myself.
All ready to go.
Wow. Okay. Welcome.
Good evening.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
We had a debate, didn't we, today about is it too late? What's the cut-off point for Happy New Year? So we'll just say Happy Monday. Thank you all for joining us and taking your time out of your busy schedules and your volunteer lives to come and join us on this webinar. Let me just turn this on airplane mode, otherwise we will inevitably get some people ringing in. Welcome aboard, Keith Webb.
Nice to be here.
Good. And the last time we sat in this room, we had a really good in-depth conversation on the podcast, didn't we?
Absolutely. But that ended about after 3 hours.
It did, didn't it? We intended to do an hour, and we went on till 10 o'clock. The good news is we're not going to keep you here till 10 o'clock tonight. We're scheduled 6 till 7. We've got our intrepid producer, Jake Kemp, who's cracking the whip and making sure that we stay on task tonight. So good evening, Jake. Thanks for looking after us. And we are here in the Graham Taylor room. So welcome to St George's Park from wherever you're tuning in. And we were just having a bit of a laugh off air, actually, weren't we, about some of the funny situations that people call in from. So motorways, dogs barking in the garden. And you don't know this, but there's two things that I want to mention about webinars. One is, did you know that I delivered the first ever FA education webinar?
Right.
Way back in the day. It was about 5 or 6 years ago from Roy Hodgson's office. And it was on the same night, I think England were playing a friendly at Wembley. So we didn't have too many tuning in. But those that did tune in were slayed by PowerPoint. And I tried to make it all singing and dancing. We got through it. It was an experience. The last time I did a webinar, I got caught with one of those inappropriate moments where I thought I was off air, and we were at a colleague's house who had recently had his boiler fixed and had turned the heating on full blast. And obviously once we started the webinar, we couldn't turn the heating down. And I might have said one or two choice words when I thought I was off air. And funnily enough, that was about 3 years ago, and I haven't been asked to do one of these since. Oh. So I'm thinking I might be forgiven now, Keith.
I hope so.
So thanks for tuning in again. My name's Jack Walton. I look after grassroots coach development for the FA in the Northwest. And my colleague here, Keith Webb, does the same job as me in the East region.
Based in Norfolk, so if people having trouble understanding my local dialect, I do apologise at the start.
And I think they've paired us together because I speak without thinking, or speak before thinking, and you think before speaking. That would be right, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So welcome, Keith. And I've heard that if you do a good job tonight, they're going to rename it the Keith Webinar.
That will be nice.
Yeah. If there's any noise in the background, guys, it's quite a lively corridor on the education wing here at St George's Park. There's an A licence going on that is thriving down the corridor there. So apologies for any background noise. The plan for tonight is we're going to go slightly off piece. So the theme is around interacting with players, and more specifically around challenging players. So we've challenged ourselves tonight to try and turn this into a bit of a professional discussion that you will hopefully find interesting. We're going to have no PowerPoint, we're going to have no slides, but what we will say is, if you want some resources, there is absolutely loads on this topic. If you're not aware, recently our Boot Room magazine has gone completely digital. Every article that has ever been written in about the 30 odd issues since it's gone out have all been indexed. They're really easy to search and find things at. So if you just pop in the FA Boot Room, I think it's the fa.com/learning is the site, but I'm sure you'll be intelligent enough to find it. And then other resources, Hive Learning. Again, if you've not signed up for that, there's so much really useful content on there that I think we couldn't even begin to do justice to tonight.
Yeah.
So what we will do is we have looked at all the questions that you've sent in, which are brilliant, and we really thank you for them. We will try and have a conversation that gets through as many of those as we possibly can. And Jake is going to keep us on track. If anything comes up in the chat box, or there's anything that you think is really relevant and urgent, just throw it in there. Jake will jump in, and we'll try and go from there.
Absolutely.
How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Right, let's kick off. So this morning, Keith, we've been here all day as part of a leadership team meeting in the grassroots unit here at the FA. And this morning, we were tasked with bringing some homework to do a little connection activity, and that homework was to bring with us a book, an article, or a journal that we'd read recently that's had an impact. And I brought mine, you brought yours. I don't know what yours is, and you don't know what mine is, so let's kick off. What did you bring?
Well, for my sins, I've decided as part of my CPD to do a Masters in Sports Coaching. Last year I was lucky enough to be able to participate in a PG Cert Ed on sports coaching, and have decided to take that a little bit further. So rather boringly, I've bought a book on research methods to help with my research dissertation that I'm going to be doing over the next sort of 3 or 4 months, based around coach education and the how that fits in with the grassroots coaching.
Ooh, and there we go. How's that? Can you still hear us, Jake?
Let me just mute everyone.
Yeah.
And then let me.
Are we back on?
Yeah.
Yep.
So looking at, for my own personal development, even at the age I'm at now, I still feel it's important that I stay current with the work that I'm doing in coach education. So decided to take this Masters on, and it's been a real eye-opener. So the book that I'm reading at the moment has given me an insight into the sort of detail and the ways of conducting research in an ethical and responsible way, to hopefully then have an impact on the way that I deliver my courses, and hopefully have an impact on the way that the coach education from a national level is conducted in the future.
So what sort of avenue are you thinking about going down in your project and your research?
One of the things that really interests me, a lot of papers that I've read, has been around coach behaviours.
I've lost your volume.
Based on elite coaching.
How about now?
Coaches that are in the elite end of the game.
Okay.
And I think what hasn't been done has been looking at the challenges that the grassroots coach faces in the recreational game, the development game. And one of the things I want to sort of look at is, do the course delivery and the course structure meet the needs of the candidate coming on the course, so they can go away and have an impact on becoming better at what they do, or do they come on for another variety of reasons? So that's the area that I want to look into.
Good.
What about yourself?
I brought in. I couldn't bring the book because I read it on the Kindle. I'm one of them that's gone digital.
Right, yeah.
Sorry for my sins. But I brought in a Guardian review of a book that took me nearly 9 months to read last year. It's got absolutely nothing to do with football, but I think there's some links that I can definitely make.
Okay.
The book was by a Harvard professor of psychology called Steven Pinker, and probably the most significant thing about it is the fact that I made it through the book.
Okay.
Because it must be 1,000+ pages, and it gets quite heavy and quite deep in data and literature, and it's, having had some conversations with some professors recently, what it has confirmed with me is that to get to that level is they think and they speak and they communicate with extreme clarity.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get onto that throughout this discussion.
Yeah.
It really strikes me that there isn't a wasted word, whether it be in text or verbally. And that's something that I really admire and I really aspire to be. But the book was called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and it was a history of human violence.
Okay.
Right, which sounds quite morbid, but the author Pinker, he presented quite a bright future, and presented that on pretty much every single measure that you can come up with. We are living in the safest times in human history. And having just watched Luther last night, I won't do any spoilers, don't worry. You could be forgiven for thinking that London was the most violent, dangerous city on the planet.
Yeah.
And I think that the media and and television and the things that we're exposed to, they have such an impact on culture and the way that we think. So much so that the next thing that I referenced in our little activity this morning was actually a guy, I think he's another professor of psychology at New York, called Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. He's worth looking up as well, and he's just done an episode on Joe Rogan's YouTube and podcast, and he was talking about how this media sensation has created a culture where we're fearful for exposing the children to what we perceive as harm. So he talked about how he's got a 9-year-old daughter. She has a phone. It's not a smartphone, so she can't install apps on it. It only has 3 numbers. No other numbers can be put in. Mum, dad and grandma, let's say, has a GPS on it. And he was saying how he sends her out round the East Village, go and get groceries. So she goes out in the streets, and you can almost hear people clamouring up, a 9-year-old. But he said, like, the children need gradually exposing to situations that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that the parallels that I would draw with coaching is getting onto the topic tonight of challenges is how do we start to expose our young developing players to environments that will challenge them and that are slightly uncomfortable maybe to us and them, in order to help them develop.
I think the uncomfortable part from the coach's perspective is that sometimes it's a new way of doing things. I think you hit a really good point around the media. I don't think people realise just how much impact the media has within football, and how it hypnotises people in the way that we observe the game by virtue of the camera angle. When we watch the game itself, we end up watching the ball, and we end up listening to there's some really good pundits out there, but there's also some average pundits who just send out platitudes.
Yeah.
And that has an impact on when people attend courses and what they feel they need to say to players, in a way that probably not understanding that maybe those platitudes and those phrases that might be understood by adults don't necessarily transfer to good learning for young players.
Yeah. Well, going back or reversing back a little bit there, one of the things that I picked up from reading the book and also listening to the other professor, was the need, more so than ever probably in this day and age, for people and coaches to have sharp critical thinking skills. So because we are exposed to masses and masses of information and content, you could go on Twitter and you could go down numerous rabbit holes and fill yourself up. But unless you've got the ability to pick through the fog and to pick out what's relevant and discard what you feel isn't, you could end up going around in circles.
Absolutely.
It's a quagmire out there.
And you make the point that to be able to critique what you're seeing, you need to have an understanding of the game. But it's all right if you don't. There are ways in which you can conduct a really good coaching session without having that knowledge. But if you ask the right questions, if you challenge people in the right way, you haven't necessarily got to be the font of knowledge.
All right, well, let's get into that then, because this is why I'm glad you're sat opposite me, because you've probably forgotten more about the game than I'll ever know. So, I mean, we could spend a while listing your accolades, but I think coached at a Paralympics, coached at was it First Division, old First Division, or youth team level, FA Youth Cup? Yeah. No, I don't want to massage your ego here, Keith, and I'm sure you don't want me to. But the levels that you've worked at in the game are far beyond what I've worked at. So when you're working with players, if you're starting to think about challenging and designing challenges for players, what's the thought process that you go through?
The thought process that I go through is basically, what is it that I want to get out of the session? So I normally work to a programme of work. Now, I know the England DNA is promoting that a great deal at this moment in time on the courses, but that was how I used to work, and found great success at it during the time I was a youth team coach. So we would work maybe on a 4 to 6 week cycle, and I'm talking now of working daily, not just the odd night and a weekend match. We would work on it daily, and it would be trying to go over a topic, but utilising different sessions, manipulate the session differently next day to try and bring the outcomes up. As I got more experienced and more attuned with the use of challenges, and I have to say that probably came at the latter end of my career within the professional game. What I tend to do is work with the group as a whole. So my challenge would be, whether it be in possession or out of possession, let's take an out of possession practice based around staying compact in midfield.
Okay.
So that would be what the group challenge was.
And so how would you get that across? How would you phrase it?
It would be, right, first of all, I'd want to get them to understand and buy into, do we need to do this work? And the use of questioning and framing it in a way of guiding players to say, right, and you use obviously the match as the fundamental thing that you can work on from what happened on. So it would be, right, what is it we didn't do well on Saturday? Okay, so it might be, how do you think we did in midfield? We thought there were gaps. So they would come back with a little bit, and I would try and manipulate the question for them to come back. So I would then try and say, once we've got the top thing, is then to look at, right, now, what is it I'm going to work on that will help everybody in the group? In the past, when I first started out in coaching, it would be, right, stop, stand still, and I would just work on the midfield. So there'd be a practice, and I would work on the 3 or 4, however many I had. What I learnt to do was utilise units and groups and individuals. So once I got the group buy-in, this is what we're going to do. Now, what as front players do we need to do to help the midfield stay compact?
So you're backing it up with a question?
Yes.
Okay. Pre-planned?
Pre-planned.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I've found on the courses is, and I understand the challenges that people within the grassroots game have in terms of coming in from work, they're then coming on quickly, getting changed. Right, now what am I going to do tonight? But I think if you work to a programme, it tends to then follow on, it sort of leads you into the questioning.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be based around, right, what are the forwards going to do? What are the midfield people going to do? And what are the defensive units going to do? And then highlight 1 or 2 individuals that might benefit in a little bit more detail by issuing personal challenges to them. So I tended to say, right, I'm not going to challenge every individual player. I'll affect them by working them within the unit.
Yeah.
And then the 1 or 2 people that I wanted to impact more deeply around the challenges that I gave them on a more personal level, it would be easier for me as the coach then to go back and not forget who I've given the coaches to, the challenges to. Because I think sometimes if we try and give out too much, we end up forgetting who we've given the challenge to. And I don't know if you've found that when you've done it.
And I'll jump in here because I'm going to play bad cop for a minute, right? So we've almost come full circle, the pair of us.
Yeah.
And I'm in a place in my coaching where I am seeing once again the value of instruction. Call it command if you want.
Absolutely.
But I think that in coaching, not as a default, but as a time and a place. Now the context is I work with under 15s boys, grassroots in Liverpool, and we have, well, actually now we've almost got Utopia, so we've got like a half a pitch, but we've got 19 players, and I've just tried experimenting it and going back to just using instruction and see what happens. And actually some of the boys feed quite well off it, because going back to my bad cop point, and we have to take a bit of responsibility for this, because we have gone, educating coaches across the country. Challenges are a good way to go, and I agree they are, as a starting point, perhaps as an initial hook to get the players engaged in the focus or activity that we're looking at. I think they're great. Where I think that we've perhaps fallen down is, and I've heard this phrase so many times, let me give you a little challenge, okay, and then I've seen, and I've done it myself, and I've seen coaches go round, and they'll go around to every single player, and it's either off the cuff, says us delivering this off the cuff, but it's either off the cuff, or it is worded in a way that really doesn't align with the principles of the game. Yeah. So and actually you can see some players getting quite confused, frustrated. Absolutely. But actually a lot of the time it is just okay, I'll shake my head, what have I got to do to get back playing in this game again? Yeah. And by the time the coach has gone around and issued 20 challenges, absolutely, the session's gone. Whereas the coach might have been better spent, right? Okay, try not to get split, for example. Try not to let them play between you, as a challenge. Right, let me step back and watch, and let me see if I can help those players, rather than feeling the need to throw a bucket of challenges over everybody and worry about catering for all, because I'm not sure if that's possible. No,
and I've always fought against that idea that command style coaching is a no. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and sometimes just by saying, I want you to do, you need to do this, I want you to do that, is effective as a coaching tool. And we shouldn't think that all of a sudden by just saying challenging or questioning or whatever is the new way of doing it. There's not a right or wrong way as far as I'm concerned. There's just a way.
But this isn't new, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. But I just think that people in the past have got carried away with these new, when they've been brought in, that in my experience, when I've been in coaching in the past, people have come on courses and seen coaches deliver in a certain way, thinking and understanding that that's how you have to coach at that level. And they've seen coaches disseminate technical detail in a command style, because that's probably one of the more efficient and effective ways of eliciting the technical detail that you needed to know. But education has evolved with better understanding of what people learn and how people learn, and so have evolved the different methods that have been used. But that's not to say that the old start or old methods were wrong in that sense. Like you say, whatever context it is, there is a reason sometimes just to say, right, stop, stand still, or I want you to do this. You should do that. And as I say, whatever way we coach on the courses, we talk about the 5, but anyone in education will come back and say there's probably another 50 or 60 ways that you can coach.
Yeah.
And on our courses, we probably promote 5 for the simplicity of getting your messages across.
Yeah. And you just said something that hit home with me there, because I'm thinking about the squad of players that I work with. So of the 19, some of whom, they're 15 now, and I've been working with them since they were 9. There is a spectrum of personalities within that squad. One in particular, obviously won't name, but who, for him, a individual challenge based around technical, tactical elements isn't necessarily the most effective way of working with him. He responds well to a
so
quick
my
instruction.
question to you would be, when did you find that out?
Throughout the years, but more so since he has come through adolescence and the adolescent growth spurt, and his psychosocial, the knock-on of his psychosocial corners from his physical growth spurt. So his huge growth spurt, more so than any player I've ever coached. Essentially playing in a new body, lost all ability, of which there was a lot. A very unorthodox player, ability overnight almost at 13, and has taken 2 years
to grow back
to get back to it. But the knock-on effect has been a real crisis of confidence, to the extent of every Saturday the team is picked around. He is the first person I speak to say, where do you feel comfortable playing today? Believe it or not, sometimes it's centre half, sometimes it's centre midfield, sometimes it's centre forward, and then we build the rest of the team around him, because I know that he is an emotional time bomb ready to go. But with him, he doesn't particularly respond well to challenge or question. He likes direct feedback, short and sharp, and praise. As you can well imagine. Now there's players on the other end of the spectrum who you could say are really inquisitive thinkers, not that he isn't, who really thrive off it, and they're almost, come on, give me some more. So I think before you start, or maybe as a process of planning, just thinking about or mapping out the players that we've got in our care, and just making mental notes, if nothing else, of who responded well to what tonight, who perhaps didn't. All right, what may be of the reasons behind that? Was it me? Was it the day that they've had at school, or whatever? But just start that thinking process, rather than just assuming that everyone is going to respond the same way to the same dose.
And I think that's what we've been poor in the past. I certainly have to hold my hands up and look at the way that I reflected when I was working at Norwich. I had files upon files of sessions that I'd done, and then afterwards, a quick reflection. How did the session go? What was the weather like and all sort? I never really took time to look at how did I perform, and most importantly, how did the players respond to the way that I was performing?
But do you not think that was a part of the time, because that was a while ago?
Absolutely.
and we were only talking today. I had hundreds of session plans on an app.
Yeah.
And the app froze in an update a couple of years ago, and I lost them all.
Yeah.
Now, 10 years ago, that would have been the end of my world. But to be honest, when it happened, it was actually quite liberating.
Yeah.
Because it was almost like a weight off my shoulders. But at that time, you probably had to record the session because there was nowhere else that they would be stored. There was no YouTube,
absolutely.
there was no internet. Whereas I think this is where the coaches nowadays who are coming through have got a real good advantage, because there is every session that's ever been delivered.
Absolutely.
Known to the human race out there.
Yeah.
So we don't need to worry so much about that. Maybe we can focus more of our efforts or our thoughts on, like you say, our interactions, and how are they.
But understanding, when you look at something that is on the internet, is understanding that the coach that's put it on there has delivered it for his players.
Yeah, good point. Very good point.
And whilst it might look a good session on paper or on the internet, it might not work as well with the players that you have.
So give me a time for you when it hasn't worked.
I worked, in fact, one of the very first sessions that I delivered as a coach educator. I came and I was given an under-9 squad to work with.
Grassroots.
Grassroots,
yeah.
Which was a big stretch for me at that particular time. And so I didn't have the advantage of knowing what players responded well to certain things. And it was an absolute car crash of a session. I had players running all over the place trying to get the ball. I had my area marked. It was all done, I thought, professionally laid out, and thought, here we go. And then as soon as the players came on the pitch, everything fell apart. Now, obviously I didn't have a scenario where I was working with a team at the time.
And what was the challenge that you gave them that ended up with the car crash?
It wasn't at that particular time when I started to understand about the process of using challenges.
Yeah.
I was still in the mindset of I'm going to work to command guided discovery. So I was still stopping up the practice and trying to highlight one person, and at the same time had another 15 or 16 players all talking and running about doing different things. So my understanding of what their needs weren't met. And so, like I said, it was one of the very first sessions that I delivered as part of the CPD events that we deliver as coach educators.
Well,
it was.
I remember having an interview for a coaching role. It was a number of years ago now in Manchester. I think it might have been around Salford. And I got given a primary school class to teach for a lesson. Yeah. And there was me on one half of the pitch and a coach who I still know to this day, called Claire, on the other half of the pitch. And I brought the kids in and I set them off with a group challenge. And if ever there was a lesson to get to know your players before you get into the technical detail, this was it. Because I didn't know that out of 30 kids, only 15 of them spoke English. And so I excitedly said, off you go. And half of them ran onto the other half of the pitch and started picking up all Claire's cones, which I thought was quite humorous because she was getting interviewed at the same time. But coming back to the challenges, you spoke there about highlighting individuals. So I can think of one player in particular that I've worked with who, when he came to us, he was very comfortable kicking the ball out of play when it comes to him. So almost like a human trampoline. Ball comes to me. He's probably been praised and rewarded for getting the ball out of play. Yeah. Tended to play in a full-back area, enjoyed playing in a full-back area. And that's not the way that I want the boys to play, and it's not the way that as a team they want to play either. So one of the things that we've said to him, and this was a couple of seasons ago now, but it was a quiet one-to-one off the pitch, instigated with a conversation around, what do you think, how does that help or hinder us when you do that? What might be better? And actually gaining his trust that if he takes a touch and loses it, I'm all right with that, and so are the rest of the team. And you're not. I promise you that if you do get any flack from any of your teammates, I'll be onto them, because that's not the way that we do things around here. We've all signed up that we trust each other on the ball. So here's what I'm challenging you to do. Yeah. Okay, when the ball comes to you, try to take more than one touch. That was an initial start. Now there'll be people going, but what if one touch is on? And I get that, which is why I didn't say you must take more than one touch. Yeah. Okay, when a ball comes to you, try to take more than one touch. Okay, and if you can, try and keep it for us. Yeah. And that was it. It was as simple as that. It was, as I would hope, as clear as that. And my role then over the forthcoming weeks in training, but more importantly in games, was either overtly public praise, see how he responds to it. At times quite well, at times not so well. Yeah. Teenage boys. Yeah. Might differ in how they respond to praise, or it might just be that I've seen it, I know what you've done, thumbs up, good lad. That's what we're after. And importantly, I found it from experience, even when it goes wrong. Yeah. So when he's tried to take the touch and he's maybe lost it on the second because his first touch hasn't been good enough, I sense that as the moments where I would earn my spurs as a coach, because if I don't reinforce the decision, potentially we've lost him, and we go back to trampoline football and kicking it out of play. Yeah.
And we've talked a lot really about use and challenges and that with young players, but I've had a lot of success of using that with adults, and I can relate that to when I was given the role of head coach to the Great Britain Paralympic squad, 7-a-side, in 2016. And people say, well, adults won't buy into it, but it was one of the most refreshing periods of my life as a coach, dealing with adult footballers who'd been professionals, who'd suffered in some way to allow them not to continue in the professional game. And my philosophy was empowering them players. So it was never a way of saying, right, I want you to do this and I want you to do that. It was, right, we have to play Russia, Ukraine, who are world leading exponents of 7-a-side football. And it was, right, now, how are we going to play against a team that does this, this and this? Right, here's my challenges as a back, here's my challenges as a midfield unit, here are my challenges as a striker.
Have you got any examples that you can remember?
We were playing, we played the Ukraine in the World Cup, and if I take the story back to the 2012 London Olympics, they lost to the Ukraine 8-0, and they were lucky to get 0, Great Britain. They were that far away. So the improvement on working with players and empowering them and challenging them was, right, come up with a strategy now that stops the Russian players finding gaps between our defence and our midfield. Because what they did do, in Russia they played professional futsal in a league, playing against able-bodied players. Their skills on the ball were phenomenal would have been phenomenal for outfield players, in my opinion. But for a disability side, it was like Barcelona playing the dog and duck on a Sunday morning. They were that far ahead. So the players came up with a strategy of playing somebody in the pocket, which I'd never even thought about doing before. And so I said, okay, well, if this happens, what are you going to do? So I put on the session which enabled certain things to happen, which challenged them in a way that they hadn't been challenged before. So we played them in the World Championships as England, and we lost 1-0, playing the old style. We played them within 8 months. We played them in the Paralympics as Great Britain, and we narrowly lost 2-1 to them. But and that was when the Ukrainian coach came over to me and said, "That's the best I've ever seen." And I said, "I never came up with it. It was the players." He said, "You are doing something well with the players then."
But that didn't happen overnight.
No. It took about 5 or 6 training camps to implement that, and for them, because all of a sudden here I was coming in and asking them to come up with the strategy. And there was a couple of players. One had played for England under 17s who had to retire from the game. Came up to me and said, "That's the first time anyone's done that to me as a coach, in giving me the responsibility, or us the responsibility, to know how we're going to play."
Yeah.
I never had a problem with motivation in training working as Great Britain. You shouldn't have. But there was never an issue of why are we doing this and why are we doing that. They were the ones that came up with the strategy. I challenged them on the strategy by putting different ways that we could challenge it. So if this happened, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And we'd put that on as a session, or we'd make our team play against it. How are you going to break that down?
Yeah.
We did it even in a way where we took a player off in case we had a player sent off, and they knew what to do if that happened. And that happened in the Paralympics.
Yeah.
That we had a player sent off, and all of a sudden they just reverted to plan B. And they knew it because it's what they came up with.
Yeah.
And so for me, just to say that it reflects around the youngsters and the adolescents, I think is baloney.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're strong enough in what your beliefs are as a coach and what you understand and what your philosophy is, it can have as big an impact, if not a bigger impact, with adults within the game.
Yeah. I think you're tapping into human motivation here, aren't you? And I noticed that, when we scanned through the questions, there was a few questions around how do you use challenges to motivate. So you're talking about, and you're right, if any of your players are struggling for motivation when they're playing in the Paralympic Games, you've got a problem.
100%.
I would say that over the last 3 years, the boys I'm lucky enough to coach, due to circumstances outside of their control, we probably have one of the lowest win percentages in the whole of England.
Absolutely.
Over the last 3, since we went to 11-a-side football.
Yeah.
And so we've had to be quite careful and considerate to design challenges that are achievable, that are within reach, but will stretch for, not necessarily all technical tactical.
Yeah.
So there'll be some days where we go to a game, and I'm sure there'll be people who are tuning in who are in the same boat here. You know that you're going to get beat. Yeah. It's inevitable because you're playing teams that are so far out of your depth due to leagues or divisions or whatever issues. So it's like, all right, how can we come out or try to come out as winners in this game? And an example I'll give is a few seasons ago we were playing a team who were, again, it was one of those games we knew that we were going to get beat. It was just a question of how many. So the challenge was, okay, do we like to keep possession of the ball? Do we like to have the ball, or would we rather not have it? We like to keep the ball, right? Let's see how many 3-pass moves that we can put together as a team. Okay? And so at half-time, the players come in. So try to put as many 3-pass moves together as we can. And if we get any sort of outcome at the end, brilliant. We come in at half-time. How many do you think we've done? So the boys at this age, I think we're about 10 or 11. I don't know how many. Well, it might have been 3. Okay, half-time. Let's see if we can beat it. What do we need to do as a team? What can you do individually to help us beat that? So we get a little bit of dialogue. And this is where I think sometimes we talk from a position of utopia with this badge on our courses, but the reality is at half-time in a grassroots football game, you've got about 2 minutes, probably a minute of quality. So you've got to be really cute with your time. So how are we going to beat it? What do you need to do to help us beat those 3-pass moves? Okay, let's go. It finished 8-0 inevitably to the other team, but who came off the happier team?
Your team.
They were buzzing.
Yeah.
Because the second half, performance-wise, they knew that they played as a team so much better than they had in the first half.
Yeah.
It was 4-0 half-time, 4-0 full-time.
Yeah. And
I learned something a lot that day. If you were to ask me now, would I do the same thing? Knowing what Pete Sturgis has put out around the England DNA, I would probably look to frame it something different that would align with staying on the ball and mastering the ball. But I learned a lot that day around motivation, and if we use the scoreline as the single measure of success, then it's a zero-sum game. A lot of the time we're going to be very disappointed. Absolutely. And so are the players.
Yeah, 100%.
So can we start to think about how do we creatively design this stuff so that it is possibly just out of grasp, or it does challenge. Obviously it taps into something more than just the outcome.
100%. And I've always been a believer throughout my coaching career that if the performance was what mattered, and if I could get my players to perform and improve, and I know sometimes that's not always it, but if they always strived to be better in the performance, in their performance, then results would come. And I've always believed that as a coach, that if you go on performance, you'll always end up being a winner. If you go on results, you'll always end up at some point feeling down and disappointed.
Well, it's a fragile form of motivation, isn't it? Because it's not in your control.
No.
Is it? You know, there's another team that are trying to stop you from doing that.
Absolutely. And as a coach, I wanted to control the controllables, and I could do that by looking at performance before results.
I've just thought about how I might word that now if I was back working with 10, 11-year-olds. I think I would probably say something around try to stay on the ball for as long as you possibly can without giving it away, without giving it back to the opposition. That's just riffing as a start point. If I was thinking about working with young players of that age, that's how I might start to phrase it. I'm just looking at time, and I guess it would probably be a good point to start to get into some more detail of some of the questions. Jake, you've been scribbling some stuff down there. Is that of relevance?
To be fair, the audience have been spot on tonight. They're sort of answering each other's questions as they're going along in the text box. Yeah,
I mean, anyone that comes to tune into Keith and I on a Monday night, they're going to be spot on, I would have thought. So, is there any questions that have come in from your end that we perhaps haven't covered yet?
There was one around. So coaches are setting challenges for players, but then parents dictating sort of over the coach, which undermines the coach.
That's a great point.
How would you go about?
Yeah, that's a great point actually. And that brings me on to...
Let me ask you a question first. Every year, do you have a turnover of players?
Yeah.
1 or 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as a coach now, I'm asking you, not as a coach educator, how do you get over your philosophy about what you stand for as a coach?
I think that some players don't want to buy in.
Well, I'm not necessarily looking at players, but do parents know what you stand for? Do they understand what it is you're trying to develop? Do they understand the ways that you're going to try and develop that?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, we've had a number of... over the summer, I learnt a really, really powerful lesson. Okay, and I've known all along that the kids don't... It's an old cliche. Well, it's not really... Well, it's a cliche because it's true, that the kids don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And we lost, like they've gone to be found, but we had a few players that went to another team in our division. And I won't say anything about the coaching environment because I'm not sure what it is, what it's like. I've seen things... But I would be comfortable in saying that we've got a fairly, what we would call it, autonomy supportive environment that we try to do, or to manage things in a way that the boys want things to be managed. And what I learnt this summer was it doesn't matter how good of or how powerful an environment that you create. At 14, 15, the bond of friendship is much, much stronger. Right. So our team are not typical because we probably have about 6 or 7 different schools represented. Okay. They're not all coming from the same school. And so these 2 players went to another team to be with their mates.
Right.
And I had to really get over my own ego to understand that. But I've learned that now and I'm comfortable with it. The second point would be on the parents. I'm quite lucky because we brought a few players in over the summer. We just put things out to advert and just said, look, there's an opportunity to play if you want to come down. Crack on. Now, the ones who've joined, I haven't told the parents what I do.
Right.
And because I don't want to use that as a stick to beat them with.
To beat the parents?
Yeah, I want to... if I'm doing this grassroots thing, I want to do it properly as a grassroots coach.
Okay.
So, but I think that it's not... It's not easy. What I think it is, it's continual reinforcement. So I had to have a word with one parent on Saturday morning who his boy has joined us this season.
Yeah.
And he's only been to a couple of games. And he was very, very vocal and very aggressive. And it was, do me a favour, I need you to turn that down because that's not helping. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
And in fairness,
yeah,
straight away. But that's still uncomfortable for me to do that.
Absolutely. My question to you is there a way that you could have had the conversation earlier with the group to let them know, look, this is what we expect, this is what I'm about.
With the parents?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I'm all for those start of pre-season, get the parents in and look, this is what we're about, this is the way that we want to play, and this is how we're going to work with the players, and our default will be, or may well be, that we're going to perhaps start from a position of challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, and what that will mean is that you need a ton of patience to go with that, because it's coming from an opposite end of the spectrum to instruction. Instruction is I tell and I expect you to do it next time.
Yeah.
If I'm coming from a challenge perspective, I'm tempting you into it, but you've got to figure out how to get over the challenge.
Yeah.
That's probably going to mean a lot of mistakes because the game's so random and fluid.
Yeah.
What that needs from the adults and the other teammates is patience and support, encouragement and time and guidance and all those other things.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going off task a little bit, but I think was that the initial question, Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was another one here about. That was what I wanted to get into. So the actual process, or some of the process, or some of the stuff that I've seen out in the field that's I think might be of value to coaches is just how you do this. So I think some of the coaches wrote about the timing? Do you stop and just shine the spotlight on one player? And
no.
Again, I think for many things, if there's one phrase that I would encourage coaches to preface, is that a word? Yeah. If there's one phrase I would encourage coaches to use more, it depends. So rather than being kind of dogmatic or absolute on either side, but as a rule, I would say I agree.
Very rarely shine the light on.
I agree.
So in my the way that I would go about delivering challenges, first of all, I'd want to know, what do the players know about what it is we're going to work on?
Yep.
And if they've got an idea about what they're going to work on, I can then base my challenges on the returns I get. So invariably, I use a lot of games, and I use games in a way that offer constraints, in the sense that I'll manipulate the size of the pitch, manipulate channels and things like that to what I think is good effect. Once I find out what they understand, then I'll look at I'll already have the challenges for the group, the unit and the individual already there. And those challenges will be based around the principles of play, whether I'm working in possession or out of possession.
Yep.
And then it will be, right, this is what we're going to work on. You've told me this. All right. Now, if it meets what I think is going to help the outcome, then I'll look at that and I'll highlight that to the players. I won't dismiss it, but I'll highlight it. And then it will be a case of, right, there are your challenges, and I'll have them written down. It won't necessarily be a case of me talking, because I think sometimes people will forget what I say. I've always been under the thing that the last thing you tell a player is the first thing he'll forget. So I'll always have it written down. What's your challenge? Oh, I forgot. Okay, well, go and have a look.
Good point. And especially in a hectic, chaotic environment, 180 BPM, noisy, competitive. You've got two teams going against each other. And one thing that I've seen, and I've fallen foul of this, game's going on, coach stops the player while the game's going on, no problem with that, in the middle of the pitch, and to try and deliver a challenge to the player. What's the player doing? Itching. Like what's the teammates doing? And there's every merit in playing a player down. Get that. So what I've found from experience helps is on the sideline, come here a sec. Or take them over to the sideline. I face the pitch, because if I'm facing the pitch, what the player isn't, and that way he or she's not looking over my shoulder to get back into the action, and then I can have that. That gives me a platform to have a more meaningful connection in that moment, where I can support, challenge, guide. I can have that interaction with the player. 30 seconds, if you can.
One of the things that I've found quite successful is getting one of the players, instead of me going over to coach, is to go and tell the player in his team
a point
about it. So now I'm trying to encourage that interaction between them. So I'm ticking the social corner, and that engagement between the two players, I think, can be more profound than me going in and highlighting it.
And then are you also, so if I'm the player that you've tasked with giving Jake a challenge on the pitch, so let's say for argument's sake we're centre half partners, is my role done at just giving that information to Jake, or what? What next?
We talk about players being able to communicate. All I hear on sometimes around the pitches in Norfolk on a Sunday morning, you're not communicating. If we talk to him. If we don't encourage that in training, when are we going to encourage it? So I tend, as part you pick up as a centre half, I happen to think that a centre half is in the focal point of seeing everything, and part of that of being a centre half is to be able to communicate. Now, you haven't got to be shouting all the time, but being other people's eyes and ears in the position that you're at is an asset to be a good centre half. And so in trying to give him that as part of that ongoing conversation we have, I want you to develop this.
And I think ongoing is the word that I would pick up on there. That if you can involve the player in this decision, so don't just see it as a bucket that you're going to throw over them.
100%.
Actually have some dialogue. Okay, what is it we're trying to improve in you?
Yeah.
Right, let's work back from there. Here's something that you can have a go at, and we're going to support you with it. And the example I'll give is one player that I'm still working with now. When he was under 12, the first time I had this conversation with him, he was good, not a bad technical player. His default was to receive the ball with his back to goal, and in the midfield area. So the ball would come in perhaps diagonally from a centre half or a full back, and he would receive facing his own goal. So it was, okay, try to let the ball run across your body. Every time the ball comes to you, wherever possible, try to let it run across your body. Now that might mean that it comes from the right back area, and he receives the ball with the inside of his left foot. Okay. Only last Wednesday night, so what are we now, Monday? Only last Wednesday night, the boys were playing in a match in training, and he did it 3 times.
Yeah. And
it was the first time, and not just 3 times where he's actually let it run across his body and let the ball run and dummied a player and beaten them and ran off with it.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice moment actually, because I was able to grab him, not literally, but and say, we've been talking about this for years, and you've just made those last 3 look effortless. That's brilliant. The other bit I want to pick up on is you said not just verbal but written. One of the things, some of the stuff that I've seen, the content out there that is on the Boot Room and on Hive, I feel like a dinosaur because it's so creative.
Yeah, and I was only looking at it. What's the name? Monday. I only looked at it Friday evening, and you're right. There's some stuff on there that I'm thinking to myself, wow.
Yeah.
That's not even coming my radar at all.
Yeah.
So there's some really good stuff that is going on out there.
Yeah.
And the great ways that now we're sharing that sort of information. And I would just urge people to go and try and challenge ourselves to do it.
Yeah.
We keep asking players and challenge players to be creative. And I think as coaches we've got to look at ourselves much more deeply and say, what other ways are there of developing our communication skills?
Good point. And speaking of which, we've typically run overtime, but Jake, before we sign off, is there anything else that has come in that is hot off the press that we could do with answering?
I suppose one that came in that we discussed a little bit earlier was that people are setting team, unit, individual challenges for their players.
Good.
And understanding that the players might make mistakes and they're about player development rather than winning at all costs. But it's how do you then manage them mistakes if you're setting challenges and players are making mistakes?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the
mistakes
on
are
the
part
of
of football.
Yeah.
You're not ever going to have a situation where your players are not going to make mistakes. You look at the Premiership and you look at the game yesterday, Tottenham against Manchester United, and you look at Trippier, one of the most lauded right backs in the country. Okay, he's there on the halfway line. He's played a ball inside to a player that he's thought he's seen. All of a sudden, the ball's gone inside.
Pogba's got onto it.
Ball over the top to Rashford. Mistakes are part and parcel of the game.
But that, I think, they're the moments where you have to hold your nerve.
Absolutely.
And do you know what? It's not easy.
Absolutely.
It's not easy at all. I don't care if you're coaching an under sevens grassroots team. There's no points, no league tables. It is still difficult to hold your nerve when the kids inevitably make some, comical errors.
Well, that was a comical error yesterday.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect an England international to make that sort of pass in that situation. So if they are going to do it as night follows day, our players are going to do that.
That's a good point. I think that is a nice way to wrap up the evening, Keith.
I think it's been a good hour or so. That's gone really quickly.
As it always does with you, I've thoroughly enjoyed your company. It's nice to get back into the webinar hot seat. I noticed that Adrian Stalley was on there, and I owe you a game of golf, Adrian, so give me a shout and we'll try and fix something up. But no, to all the people that have tuned in, look, thank you so much for giving up your Monday night. We're all, we know that you're all volunteers and do this for free, and if you didn't do it, we would be out of a job.
Absolutely.
So thank you for everything that you do. You've probably learned so much more from each other in the chat box than you have from us, but I hope you've enjoyed or taken something. I hope we've inspired, empowered and or supported you some way in your journey tonight. I think we're going to try not to drink any red wine over tea.
Will.
I will.
You will.
Okay. Webby at Webby Offside, is it?
At Webby Offside.
Yeah, and at Jack Walton 1. If you want to give us any feedback, let us know how it went. Tonight was a challenge for us. We tried not to use any content or any PowerPoint. Let us know how you found it, and please engage with all that content in the boot room and Hive Learning. The last thing I'll mention is the date today is the 14th of January. You may or may not have seen, we are launching a campaign across grassroots football, which Gareth Southgate has backed. Starts on the 21st of January. It's called 21 Days of Positive. We only do positive. If you Google that, again, you're smart enough, you guys, to find that. There is some challenges on there, I think, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I've seen the spreadsheet that's coming out. They look quite good, actually.
Yep.
So I'm having a go. I've signed up for that. So we'll see how that goes. So let us know how you thought tonight went, guys, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again for coming.
And one final question for Webby, because I think the internet cut out and we missed it. Can you confirm the name of the book that you brought with you today?
Research Methods in Sport.
Research Methods in Sport.
Available in all good bookstores.
Absolutely. Or not good bookstores.
Open at your peril. Okay, guys, thanks again, and hopefully see you again on another webinar soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please help spread the word or leave us a review on iTunes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. You can reach me on Twitter at JackWalton1, and don't forget to follow Liverpool FA at Liverpool_CFA. See you next time.